Scott is a senior consultant here at CDW and a self-described mainframe evangelist. At CDW, he designs and implements mainframe software solutions with a focus on DevOps. He's been involved with mainframe computing for several decades, architecting and developing z/OS Sysplex components while working at IBM, then taking on the role of principal architect for the CA Mainframe 2.0 initiative, including the CA's Mainframe Software Manager. He then served as the chief architect for the Mainframe and Workload Automation business unit at CA. He's been involved with Share for over 25 years and is currently the president of Share. In addition, we have Jennifer Velasquez from IBM. Jennifer is the worldwide DevOps leader for Enterprise Systems. She's been actively engaged with enterprise customers, helping them to plan and execute strategies for improving business agility and the effectiveness of software delivery. She has over 30 years working in the industry, delivering world-class results in response to the various challenges faced by numerous organizations. Her depth of expertise has proven to be invaluable to delivering successful outcomes for the needed transformational changes. She is inspired by meeting with her clients where they are on their journey and making their vision a reality. So with that, I'll pass it along to Scott to get started.
Thanks, Brian. So, Jennifer, how are you doing today?
Doing well, and you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. This time there's no amber liquid to discuss this over because it's a little early.
But, indeed, I have my coffee and I'm ready. We're gonna do the coffee edition today.
Awesome. Yes, it's the DevOps on Z coffee edition for those of you ready to rock. So I think we've had this chat a number of times, and I think that in the couple of years that we've been working together on this stuff, we've talked to many customers and have dealt with a number of them who are on different places on their journey, some of whom are well along the way and some of whom are just looking to get started. What would you say are really the, kind of from a high level perspective, are the key things that customers really should be looking at from the zSystems side to begin and get moving on their DevOps journey?
Well, I think some of it is the devil's in the details, right? Everyone is looking at how am I going to deliver change and how am I going to meet the business. That's not radically new, but it's how to actually achieve that goal and actually to be able to deliver on it consistently. Those are the things that have challenged and plagued organizations to meet that goal. And that's where DevOps comes in. Now, they may know it under different terms: DevOps, DevSecOps, AIOps, GitOps, whatever. But the idea of how do we do things in the most efficient manner possible, because let's face it, we're lazy, right? We want to get the easy way, the easy button to make this stuff work and to have that repeatability, because technology is going to continue to grow and we need to be able to adapt and bring that into our processes without having major disruptions or hurdles to get there.
Yep, I agree. It's kind of critical to take a look at what the folks on the distributed side have done, because they've come from an environment chaotic.
Yeah, it was wild west.
Right. Yeah. And so a lot of this has occurred because, right, on the mainframe side, you might have a few mainframes. On the distributed side, you might have a few thousand distributed servers and some number of virtual servers on each of those servers, and getting software moved around, configurations changed is a real pain in the you-know-where. So, so we should really take a lot of these process improvements and technologies and apply them on the mainframe side, especially on the z/OS side, since they already seem to work pretty well on the Linux side, and kind of join the fight to make things work better. One of the things that I've noticed, and I'm pretty sure you have also, is that in many places, because of the perceived inflexibility of the mainframe and the technologies there, many customers have begun to develop around it, right, and kind of wall it in, or fence it off. And I think that this is one of the ways that we can break down those fences. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think of it back to when, we used to have the Polaroids and we had the black and whites, and then we started introducing color, right?
Hmm.
Into the pictures. The problem is that the mainframe is a very capable platform, and we probably have had the most rigor around the way in which we deliver systems by far over some of the other platforms. But the problem is the lack of evolution of that, the respect of what we do well, but then being open to changing the things that may need to be improved has put a cloud around us, right? And I'm not
Yep.
using cloud in the sense of hybrid cloud, but the idea of shadowing us and not making us a prime participant at the table. And so, absolutely, to your point, it's capable, but we have to be willing to do it. We have
Absolutely.
to be willing to be part of the delivery. And if we think about where technology has gone, I look back to when I started my career, most of our solutions were single platform, self-contained little components, whether that be a monolith on the mainframe or something on distributed. Never did the two meet. That went by the wayside, what, 20 years ago? And we started integrating. We were bringing data, we were bringing UIs, we were bringing AI. It doesn't really matter. It's going to continue to grow, but that explosion that we've had on how we can use and complement one of another is why the importance has to be on how we deliver, because it's about
Right.
that product, it's about that whole in order to realize the value.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, we've definitely mastered the art of delivering software that works well and fails infrequently, but now we have to deliver it much more frequently, with the same level of quality and care and control.
And we have to be able to manage the disruption, right?
Right.
Because there may be
Hmm.
changes happening elsewhere, maybe not directly on something for the frame, but in order for that technology to deliver, they need a change from us. How
Right.
do we make that happen in addition to what we already had on the table, right?
Yep.
We're working towards our goals. We can't say, "Oh, wait 6 months, we'll get to you then."
Exactly.
Their world doesn't
Exactly.
doesn't accept that as an answer. And that's one of the reasons why I think organizations find that they try to wall off or box or remove the mainframe from the value it brings to the equation. It's not that they don't recognize the value, it's but I've got to be able to move. And if it
Right.
can't move, I got to
Exactly.
figure out a way to fence it or do something with it.
Right.
Put
All
the
right.
problem child in the corner.
Exactly. So let's talk about where we are today. A lot of, as usual in the IT business, there's lots of things going on at the same time. Some are good, some are not so good. Um, I mean, what do you see around things like open source and containerization in this world?
Oh, absolutely. All of these areas, these are from a state of industry, these are prime areas that are impacting mainframe development as well as others. But when we look at it and we think about what the challenges have been identified for Z, finding the skill sets, being able to deliver at the rate that they want, bringing in new technologies and the like, the on-prem versus in the cloud versus cloud native, all of these kinds of discussions, we have to take a step back. What's the trend that's happening right now from a language perspective? Are we seeing a lot of growth in COBOL? It's not to say that COBOL is not still relative. It is. But if we want to tap into the skills that are coming out of the marketplace, the way that we can tap into skills for areas for things like automation or other, why not be open to using things other than what we used for the last 20 years? So it's that growth area of where resources are, the idea that we can do things in a more online, asynchronous kind of way, and just evolving from the way that we have been doing things. So DevOps, I mean, you pretty much heard ops with just about anything, and it's all being based off of the idea that we can capture state and evolve, or should I say, with that identified state, be able to reproduce any concept or any capability at a given time in context of the processes and the automation in which delivered it. That's huge. I mean, think about
Mhm.
what we used to do every time that there was a problem or defect identified, an incident that happened, right? Well, I'm not reproducing it in my test environment. Okay, well, how do we find it? How much time did we waste doing all of those things? If we could magically just be able to say, on this day, here's my code base, here what was deployed to that particular environment, and here's the configuration of that environment. Huge. But these are the
Absolutely.
areas that are empowering organizations to move fast.
Yep. I mean, the last 20 years, I think we've both seen this concept of modernization means ripping and replacing what you have, getting it
Yep.
off the mainframe, running it someplace else. And a lot of lessons have been learned there, that there are just some things that just don't, there are just some things that are made for mainframes, and there are some things that are made for cloud, some things that are made for distributed or even bespoke platforms. And I think that many of these places are, kind of returning to the mainframe and learning, through the lessons learned in those activities, learning that they need to be able to do some of the same things that they've done on their distributed and cloud side on the mainframe. Right.
Well,
So
yeah.
it's not just let's do Python on the mainframe. It's let's do Python like they do Python on the distributed side. Let's create services out of our COBOL programs. Let's make batch look like a service to something running out in the distributed land, so that you do get to a point where everything is just a node on the network, and each thing does the thing it does best and most economically.
Absolutely. Like you said, everything has value. It's recognizing what that value is and tuning your architecture to the value that you're trying to obtain. The thing that I think is interesting about the modernize in place, we've all been there. Oh, we're getting off the mainframe. We're moving these particular apps off the mainframe. And I think it's kind of ironic because in reality, we were trying to take a boat and go against the current and up the waterfall, right? Businesses are saying we need things faster. Mainframe, we're putting you in a corner because we can't get it faster from you.
Right.
But what they realized is to recreate that, there's so much risk. And I'm going against the current of, oh, well, we're going to have to wait 3, 5, 10 years before you're going to get any new functionality. That's completely against, perpendicular to what their goals were. I
Right.
need faster. So I think that it's interesting that the industry has come to that point of realizing, modernize it in place, use what works, and then incorporate it into that larger architecture that optimizes across what the value points are.
Yep. So I think so key and kind of critical to all of that is the adoption of an agile and a DevOps mindset. Right. It's not just
You've got
tools
to have
and
synergy.
It's not just tools and processes. It's culture and people too.
Absolutely. And I think that the culture piece comes into play more in the mainframe than on other platforms, simply because the culture in some of these elements, the idea of having the automation, the idea of being able to manage across multiple targets and the like, some of that came out of what was occurring with the chaos in the Wild Wild West. So when we think about incorporating that in, it's against the things that we've done for 20 years. So culturally, we're having to learn, or should I say, accept more change than maybe some of the other platforms.
Oh, there's no doubt, right? There's no doubt that the mainframe has always been very cautious, or folks working on the mainframe very cautious, want to make sure that all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted before taking something from, development to unit test to function test to production,
Mm-hmm.
because of the impact of a mistake or of an error, right? We have always talked about and preached the value of getting things found and fixed earlier, which meant that we spent a lot of time earlier trying to figure these things out, and of course that then elongated development cycles. It meant that we did more things and tried to release more at one time, versus this agile mindset of, build the, hack them up into small pieces, build them, deliver them in small pieces, and get them running. And that way, what you're doing is you're essentially working on smaller pieces in shorter periods of time and getting things tested in, at the necessary level, so that you can get it out the door and then work on the next thing, as opposed to the large waterfall projects, which you alluded to before, right, which could take anything from 6 months to 2 years, if not longer in some cases.
Right. You're getting the reward for the value you're delivering earlier.
Right.
And the unique thing about that is that, I don't know about your experiences in waterfall, but I've delivered systems just to have them say, well, our requirements have changed because, since we agreed to
Right.
this X number of months, years, whatever before, technology's changed here, or regulation changed there, or whatever. And it's like, and here we go again.
Right.
You got all excited for the party just to be let down that you're going to have to do another iteration. So I really think, in fact, I was just talking to a client about this yesterday. This is one of the hardest parts for those on the mainframe to grasp, that idea of small deliveries. How do I break up the work? I'm so used to thinking of it in a monolith kind of mindset, right? The huge batch, the huge set of requirements that we have to deliver. Well, why? That's that part of the culture where probably the most attention has to be put. If we can start thinking about our work differently to break it in those smaller increments, having the automation, nobody cares, I don't want to say nobody cares about, they want to use it, right? But we, by nature of human, we're lazy. We like that automation to do our work for us. But
Right.
we have to be able to think about it in those small increments to make that work.
Well, and in many ways, right, the way we worked is a reflection of the kind of the economies that were in play when a lot of the tooling and a lot of the stuff that we use today was being developed, whether you're talking about the underlying MVS and OS 390 and now ZOS, to all of the ISV tools, to the actual applications that are being built or have been built over time and are still running today, albeit behind web front ends and mobile front ends, right? If you go back, and I'm going back 40 years here, there's are we really working with the right view of economics and economies of scale, right? In 1983, I'm going back to, disk storage was $200 a megabyte, right? Think about $200 a megabyte, which is about $500 in today's money, and a computer programmer was about 20 to 40K. I didn't call them software developers in 1983. I discovered. Nope. But and even there, right? That salary is more like 50 to 90 in 2023 dollars. And of course, right, in today's world, software developers have lots of different levels and are viewed differently. But looking down below, right, 20 terabytes now is sorry, it's $20 a terabyte for storage, and a software developer is making basically near parity to what they were in 1983, right? So it's a huge shift in how you want to spend your time and money. So you wanted to you would essentially in 1983 it was cheaper to throw programmers at the problem, and in 2023 it's cheaper to throw hardware at the problem, and that's how we should start to look at solving these problems, right? I mean, we keep talking about the key to agile and DevOps is automation, 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 right? In 1983, if you said you were going to spend a lot of compute MIPS and compute storage on some of these problems, people go, "You're nuts," right?
Exactly.
I can't buy a computer big enough to solve those problems. And so, we have to not only shift where we are doing our work, but we have to shift how we are looking at our work.
That comes back to that culture thing again, right? We were conditioned based off of our experience in the space to think one way. And now, not to say that the storage and CPU and stuff magically went out of the equation, but what drives the equation, as you pointed out, changes, which means the way we approach the problem may need to change. All that getting back to the culture. One of the other things that on the culture and talking about the automation element is one of the things I hear from customers is, well, I'm not sure that I like this because I won't be able to change these things. Trusting the automation is going to provide what they need because they're so accustomed to getting on the keyboard and fixing the issue. They're conditioned to think that way because they don't believe that automation can provide them a space that is consistent with their needs because they haven't had it.
Right.
So it's, again, it's learning, it's trusting, it's culture, it's thinking about it in new ways, and economics is definitely a driver of some of that thinking.
Right. Well, and also it's maturity too, right?
Oh, sure.
Think about the reliability of compute and storage in 1983 compared to today, right? It's like night and day, right? And so people trusting the machine to do the right thing, although it was, it's kind of an interesting conversation to say, well, I don't trust my automation to do the right thing, but I do trust my application to do the right thing. It's always kind of an interesting conversation to have with somebody, but that's the point, right? Is that when you get to a place where I need to deploy the same software change to 50,000 servers, there's just no, the cost to do that with human beings today it's just impossible.
Astronomical. Yep.
Right? I mean, you couldn't do it, right? In 1983, you didn't have 50,000 of anything, right? So here's where we are right now today. If you think about a large modern parallel sysplex, you may not have 50,000 CICS regions, but you might have 5,000, or you might have 500, and getting that out of a manually monitored process into something automated could get you from being able to put out fixes or put out updates to your application on a weekly basis as opposed to a quarterly basis.
But that's another point. Do I even need those number of environments? We had them because we got pushed into a situation at some time. We created them, but now we've created something that we have to maintain.
Right.
To keep up to date. So it's getting the balance. Again, going back to that economics question, getting the right balance in the equation so that you get the best reward with the minimal investment.
Right. And it's always, I personally believe it's always better and more viable to change an automated process than to assume that an update to a run book that people read is going to happen.
Well, and that's the other part, right?
Yeah.
I want to be able to scale this change. I want to change the way that we're delivering to or updating the 500 regions, right? If I have that automated and I'm the one responsible for driving the changes to those CICS regions, then I can update my automation and I have 500 applied. When I'm doing it manually, I'm trying to type up my notes to say how to do this and distribute it to the 500 people or 500 teams that are using these regions and saying, I've accomplished this, whatever, I'm statusing them on where we are. Lots and lots of overhead, lots and lots that are putting things into that people space. Now, I'm not, one of the myths that I always hear, oh, well, DevOps is going to replace my job. DevOps is not replacing anybody's job. But what it's doing is it's allowing us to be able to scale and meet the demands that the business is asking us to do. How do I use those particular regions? How do I minimize, I'm going to call it my housekeeping, right? My cleaning of my house to what my poor set of hours will allow me to do.
Yeah, it's raising the level of what you're doing, right? As opposed to going through and having a spreadsheet with 500 boxes that you check off as you've done each one of the things, right? You
that likely someone's going to miss.
Right. Or when one of them goes wrong, now you have to go and investigate it, right? You then, it didn't work in my house because we have a dog and the dog has had hair everywhere, but we bought one of those little iRobot vacuumers, right? It's way better to just look at the picture of what it vacuumed and say, yes, the house has been vacuumed, right? As opposed to, oh, did you vacuum the kids' room? I'm not going in the kids' room. Send the robot in, right?
Right.
But and that's the kind of thing here.
It may do a layer of the vacuum, but you may still have something that has to be done above and beyond. But now you have time to do that because that base layer was all done through the automation.
Exactly.
We have a question
And
in
you
the
know,
Q&A.
eventually you can. Yep. Oh, we do.
Yeah, and it's tied into the economics, so I thought we would just bring it in right now, which is the problem we're seeing is that the cost of 1 to 2 mainframes is focused more by the CIOs versus cloud computing and on-demand scaling.
Yes, I understand, right? And so the unfortunate part of the economics of the mainframe, right, is that it's a concentrated bill, as you're pointing out, and that you're paying a much more amorphously distributed bill when you're talking about cloud computing. It tends to go down to the departments, right? So, and that can be good or bad depending on how the folks in your accounting department operate. And so one of the things that we try to help our customers do, and I'm sure Jennifer you do this too, right, is you help the customer, is you help the mainframe folks point their leadership and their folks who are doing the payments at all of the possible things that they're not looking at when they're doing, charging for a platform, right? When somebody says, okay, I got to, we've got umpteen thousand servers, right? So how much are you paying per license for Windows or Linux? How much are you paying for all of the software that's being distributed over it? How many people are supporting that in the IT department? How many people are supporting that in the business units? And so what you need to have is a conversation around fair accounting, right? Are you really accounting for all of the costs when you're comparing the mainframe bill to the other bill, whether it's Azure, AWS, or just your in-house IT? And it's a hard argument to have, but when you can sort of build your side of the ledger that says, okay, this is all in, right? Here's the hardware, here's the software, here's the people. Now, on your side, when they say, okay, well, we've summed up all the hardware, it's really easy to point out where they haven't summed up all the hardware. And also, right, mainframe tends to have the secondary capabilities like dev, test, and DR and business resilience built into it. Ask them and say, okay, so what's your DR plan? What are you paying for all those machines? What are you paying for all that software? Where you're going? Are you have you accounted for the provider that's doing your DR for you if you're doing it through a third party? So there's no magical answer here, but I know that my team here at CDW, and I'm sure that there are folks at IBM who do this too, will help you prepare for. I don't want to call it a fight, but prepare for the argument between mainframe and distributed for taking specific actions.
I concur with everything you said, Scott. I will say that there's I'll add 3 things. I had a customer once actually come down to the cost by line of code within their organization, and by far mainframe won above and beyond anything that they were doing on cloud. The fact that they have a distributed bill on the cloud is definitely something that has diffused that view of what the cost is, but I've seen that changing of late. They're starting to look at the total cost of operations at the end of the year, and that's bringing across all of the different divisions the view of the cost. So that's helping. Now, if they're in a multi-cloud situation, sometimes it doesn't quite have the bang that you would expect it to. But that's one trend that I'm seeing that I think is going to help bring some normalization to the discussion. The other element that I'm seeing is the emergence of the DevX team. As we start looking at DevOps and the idea that we are going to have an SRE team or a team that's responsible for what are the processes that are being defined and how I'm going to provide the set of services that are available through our pipelines, that team is starting to absorb some of the people cost. That team is not associated with the mainframe from a corporation point of view, so we get free services to some extent. We come in under the radar, if you will. So that's another place that's helping.
Yeah, I will say that in a previous life, had a customer go through this exercise, and when we got sort of the spreadsheets from the mainframe team, and then we got them from the distributed team, it was interesting how almost everything associated with infrastructure, not compute, was charged off to the mainframe, because the mainframe was the first box in the room that was the the raised floor.
Right.
And then they put all kinds of, and of course back in the 1970s when that room was constructed, right, there were lots of really large pieces of hardware, right? And now, they had consolidated down to one. It was a good sized mainframe, but it was one, and it was in the corner, and it occupied 1% of the room, and the rest of the room was occupied by, the racks and racks of servers, of blades who were doing serving, and the air conditioning was all being charged off to the mainframe. And it's like, well, maybe you want to point that out. And some, and it's not, I don't think that it's somehow evil. I think it's just that things take a while to change and be noticed. And you got to sort of point out where some of these obvious failures have occurred.
Yep, agreed.
But sort of But I would say that the one thing that you want to think about from this presentation is that I was a basketball official for a long time. I worked at high school and college, and the one thing that they always taught us in basketball officiating school is don't be an irritant. Right? You want to get into the game, you want to do the game, and if they don't remember your name or what you looked like when you walked out, you had a successful game. And sometimes we are, as mainframers, the irritant, because we say you can't do that because, and it's always the thing that follows because is because the mainframe isn't like that. If we can stop doing that, we definitely help in some of these conversations, right? You can't say it's going to take a quarter to deliver that function unless it really needs to. Right? If it's going to take 3 days to code, and the other 93 days the other 83 days of the quarter to get it out the door, then you're becoming an irritant, and you're placing focus on yourself.
But I think the bottom line is we're changing the equation, right?
Yep.
And ultimately, if the organization already has the equation set and it's how you represent yourself within the equation, that's what you're getting at now. How can you be not an irritant in the way that you represent it?
Right.
If they're open to defining the equation, then one of the successful ways that I've been working with that is I ask the questions. So what's what's the DR plan for that platform, so that I can match my cost associated with what that's being defined as the standard.
Exactly.
Right. Yep. And so when you start changing the game, they realize that there's some flexibility. Maybe it's table fit pricing, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but we can change the equation in the context of the way they want to view pricing.
Right.
We have to be at the table to ask those questions and not be shadowed by that preconceived notion that we're putting it in the corner. We got to fence it off somehow.
Exactly. If you want to look at it in a positive light, maintain your relevance.
Yep.
Right?
I like it.
And we have a great advantage in that most of the core data operated on by your company is probably still on your mainframe. So make it as easy as possible for people to get to it, and don't get in the way of that. Is really a helpful thing. And so this is a little bit more of the same, right? One of the things that's true and has, I think, hampered the mainframe culture from moving forward in a lot of ways is that IBM and the ISVs and the other hardware vendors have sort of created this environment where everything ever written will continue to run, right? So if you wrote it in 1964 and it ran on OS 360, it'll still run today on ZOS 2.5 on a modern machine. And that's just not been true on other platforms. Now, there's a fair amount of investment protection on other platforms as well, but they don't go through the level of protection that ZOS and the Z machines today do, right? I mean, they even created a word for this, right? Deprecation, it just sounds like a terrible word to me.
You bring back memories of me when I used to buy games to run on my little PC here, right? And I'd run my games. I'd get so excited. Oh, I'm going to get a new piece of hardware, and I'd get the hardware out, and I plugged in my game, and it's like incompatible. Great. I just lost all of my games that I had. Right? It was, you just got to come to expect. If I got a new PC, I had to replace all of the software that was on it. And like you said, mainframe's not that way.
Right. And that's, has kind of, it helps, right, in that you don't have to worry too much about your applications not working, but it hurts in the sense that it gives a kind of a false sense of security that running the machine like you did 20 years ago is somehow valuable and efficient, because it's not.
Well, in my analogies, I mean, I think that it's been great in the sense that it has allowed us from an enterprise standpoint to have our uptime, to have the validity of our systems, and to simplify some of our decisions when it comes to upgrades. However, it's also been like the dessert and sugar tray of I've incorporated sugar into every recipe and everything I eat. It's not necessarily good for my health in terms of, am I still exercising? Am I doing the things to consume that sugar that I put in? So I think that the being current, being utilizing the platform for what it is, acknowledging our technical debt, those things somehow have become underplayed or under lack consideration, if you will, in our plan, because we have that safety net of that our applications will continue to run.
Right. And again, and that's, I think, has hampered, some of the abilities for people to take on
Yeah.
and use some of the new functionality, right? So, a key, again, for this discussion, we can talk about modernization across the entire platform, but for this discussion, it's really about reimagining how the software development lifecycle works and being able to. Now, I don't think that anybody wants to get to 20 commits per day on the mainframe side, because the applications aren't moving that fast. But I would like to get to, maybe a commit a week.
You want to be able to deliver at the speed you need to deliver, not
Exactly.
at the speed that your process defines you can deliver. And that is the difference. And when we think about having that agility and ability to make commits, it may not have to do with our delivery. It may have to do with how we stand in the way for those other services to come to life.
Right, exactly.
And that comes back to our overall technical architecture and approach.
Right. And I think one of the key things too, right, is the architectural approach, as well as looking at the skills that are available to us, right? I mean, that we know that there's probably 1,000 Java programmers available to every COBOL programmer, and I might be underestimating that, right? And so looking at it from the perspective of the availability of skills, and so you could get one of your COBOL experts to work with 1,000 Java experts, and not only move the application forward and make it available, available to more people to be able to work on, but also you're taking advantage of some of the cost savings that are available on the platform to things that are running in Java.
You're exploiting the platform. Yeah, right. Absolutely. And when we think about the skills, we want to stay relative, right, in the world. If I was to take an old the bunny ear antenna and hand it to my daughter, she'd look at me and go, "What in the world is this for?" She'd have no clue, right? Yep. We have to stay relative to the skills that are in the market, but that doesn't mean that we don't span the skills or the generations. We relate to all, but that's the part that I think in the mainframe, we want to bring in the new technologies, we want to bring in some new experiences, but we're not going to change.
Right.
Well, how do you do both? And it's,
you can't.
Well, you don't. You can span the generations, but you have to choose to do so. If you try to force a generation back into what you did 20, 30, 40 years ago, they're likely to walk away.
That is and that is the big problem too. Everybody keeps talking about the mainframe skills shortage. And again, right, yes, there's a skills shortage for things that were written in the 80s and a skills shortage for things written in the 90s, right? But if you start them on the things that are available today, right, and the technology that's there today, they'll naturally adapt backwards to some of the older stuff, right? I mean, if you look at people who are very good at Linux and people who are very good at Windows, they may start on the GUI, but eventually they fall back onto the command line and start typing those crazy 3- and 4-letter commands, right, that none of us on the mainframe know, but the guys who know Unix know, and the guys who know Windows know, and the guys who know Linux do, right? Just like we, don't always have to go through ISPF to do what we need to do, or some of the, line mode style stuff, right? Because we've got that expertise. I mean, I trained a lot of folks in previous jobs, and they started off using the GUIs that were available on the products, and eventually some of them they went into ISPF because that's what they that was the most efficient for them, and and they did definitely, a bunch of them learned the TSO commands for allocating data sets and things like that because they just learned, and they fell into the patterns that they felt were most efficient for them.
But they're developing the patterns based off of their experience. What do I need to do to get my job done? And that's the part that is, people want to say, well, I don't want to go to this. Well, maybe you don't, but that doesn't mean that your brother over here might not want it. We have to be able to diversify a little bit so that we can relate to the development population, and they can be drivers of the platform, utilize the mainframe.
Right. Set up the, you may not want to use them, but set up the tools for them, right? Set up, make it possible for a developer to use Eclipse or VS Code as their primary form of coding.
Absolutely. Right? I use a GUI every day, but that didn't mean that I wasn't in terminal last night writing a script.
Exactly. Right.
What's the right purpose for what I'm trying to do? Is it a couple of lines of work that I need to get done? Or do I need to do a whole lot of analysis and I need to have a set of tools? We do it every day when we're repairing things around the house, right? We may go get that one screwdriver, but then, you know what? I need to do a whole lot of sheetrocking here. I'm going to go get the power gun, right? Or the driver, because I'm not going to screw each one of those screws individually. Nope. Oh, well, I'm going to screw them individually, but I'm going to have some power behind it besides my poor bicep. It's just not going to.
Exactly. Right. And the more we adapt, the more standard we are with the rest of the enterprise, right? I mean, one of the things about this is that probably folks in the company on the other side of the IT wall have this all set up, and it won't be hard for you to adapt to what they're doing, right? Adapt the mainframe into those processes, into those tools, because they all just seem to work with us. Right?
Well, there's a couple of things there, right? Yeah. One, we are all trying to deliver against a product's needs, right? We're trying to get a set of features out to support whatever the business wanted. The second aspect of it, and I often have this conversation with clients, is what's the difference between the text I have for my COBOL member here and the text they have for their Java? Last time I checked, they're both readable. So what kind of unique capability do we need to version that?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, as you point out, the only difference is how you turn that from source code into runnable programs.
Now we're talking different stuff there, right? But that's the thing. Don't be different just for the sake of being different. Be different only where we're adding value back into the equation. Otherwise, man, let's be lazy and let others take care of it for us.
Right, and for the most part, again, if you were a long-time Endeavor user or ChangeMan user, you have buried the details, right? That it's all buried into the tooling. All we're saying here is bury it further into other tooling as well.
Exactly, and that means that we have to be open to this idea of some tools that we may not have heard of before. But if they solve the problem, i.e., let's get back to the capabilities. What is it that we need it to do? If it solves it, why are we objecting?
Well, because it's not what we did before.
Back to culture.
Right. Well, I am old, so. So, and this too is something that many customers have done for a long time, which is you take your configuration and treat it just like it's code, right? I know of dozens of customers who are using Endeavor and ChangeMan and the like, right, to put their Parm Live members and configuration members in to track the changes, right? Now, clearly, you don't compile those things, but you do advance them through a life cycle, right? They go from, conception to development to test to production, right? It may be less steps than, you know, a piece of code, but certainly the point being that it's just the same stuff. And if you adopt these processes across the board, it makes it easier to carry a configuration change that might be necessary to go with a particular code change, as opposed to having everybody on the phone, you know, you type this command, I'll type that command, oh shoot, that didn't work. Oh, can you do this display? What happened? Right?
It's moving it into a practice. It's taking that configuration and saying, you know what, when we think of build, what kind of checks do we need to apply to that configuration to make sure that it is going to work for us, or that it doesn't open up XYZ, right? It's about doing those things in a unique way. Where DevOps comes in and is causing a cultural change within the mainframe community is thinking along those lines as it being, I'll call, redefining status quo. Not every organization put their JCL and their racks and things into an SCM. Some did, some didn't. And if they did, maybe they versioned it, but they didn't think about it having a software delivery lifecycle associated with it. So they didn't have any rigor around it. Now we're seeing them see, well, you know what? I wasn't making a change to the JCL if I didn't need it for that particular feature. So why shouldn't that dependency be noted? And that's the power that they're getting out of this set of automation, and having a single SCM that allows them to have all of those types, including what's happening out with my APIs and anything to do with what's happening over on the distributed associated.
Exactly. Right. And it's and very similarly, right, it's not just the tooling that matters, it's the processes and the culture behind that are driving those tools that makes a big difference.
I would say that's the starting point. The tools should be there to implement or support your process, but you have to know what your practice and your processes are that you're trying to implement. We can pretty much integrate any kind of tool you want.
Right.
But is it going to accomplish your goal? I don't know. You may be hammering that screw with, you know, with a screwdriver instead of using, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yep.
And you want the right end.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you could lay out the greatest set of tools, but if people don't use them in the way that they were intended to be used, right? You know, if I continue to use a waterfall process, it doesn't matter how much Eclipse and Jenkins and UCD I put into the environment, I'm still going to be doing things the same way I did before. I mean, I might gain a little bit of a benefit, but if we really, you know, invest in learning Agile and pivoting towards it, then you're gonna. It's like a force multiplier, right? I have the right culture. I'm using the right tools. I mean, one of the most important things here is to unleash people to work in parallel, right?
Yeah, for
sure. In the waterfall process, it's very difficult to, you know, organize changes that were done at the same time that aren't compatible, right?
Well,
in Agile, it's much easier.
You can implement or automate a bad process, and that's the problem. That's the reason why I say if we start with the practice and know what we want out of the practice, then we can start talking about what process we need to achieve that practice. Right. And if we start there, that keeps us out of the, oh, well, I'm automating what I do today, and I'm never questioned whether or not it's a good or bad process.
Exactly, because it just works.
Yeah. So yeah, I automated it, and that's where I often challenge people. Are we automating what we do today, or are we really trying to aspire to what DevOps is about? Driving that efficiency, driving incremental delivery so that we can pivot and manage that change should it be presented, because I guarantee you it's going to be presented.
Yep. Oh, I mean, it should really be noted, right, that a lot of these processes and tools were built thinking that the people who are doing the work are geographically highly distributed, right? So that you want to minimize the impact of one person on another, and so so part of this is to allow people as much independence as possible as they're doing their job, and then only having to have you know, interactions where there's conflict, as opposed to with some of the tools that are sort of the state of the art today, right? Because of the way they're built, if I need to insert myself in front of you, right, I need to talk to you, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to a Git-based workflow where I can just get going, and then when I'm done, right, it'll be noted to you that somebody got in front of you, and you might get mad, but at least it didn't mess up what you were
But it
doing.
didn't stop anybody. It didn't
Right.
stop anybody. And it provides us a way to modify our processing as we go. We may not have it
Yep.
right, but that's another thing that has really plagued us on the mainframe, in the sense that we set up these library managers and we're still working the way that we designed it at the time somebody implemented it. And guess what? Nobody even knows it's specialty skills to go
Right.
down there and change anything. This new world is exposing it all in common language, readable language that allows us to be able to tap into that skill population, right? Those pools, as well as have commonality cross-platform.
Right. So from a slightly more concrete perspective, right? All of the major ISVs and IBM have a broad range of DevOps tools, and you've all been working very hard to adapt them for mainframe DevOps. I mean, I guess I could use a quote from a previous president. If you like your intertest, you can keep your intertest. If you like your expediter, you can keep your expediter. And if you like your debug tool, you can keep your debug tool, right? And they've been extending them outwards, to be viewable through IDEs in sort of the way that distributed developers are able to do source level debugging of Java and other languages as well. So it's this is really the efficiency has to be enabled by the old guard, right, and couldn't be taken advantage of by the new guard, but can also be used by the old guard. And there's plenty of folks who are using these IDE extensions and tools extensions to develop and create better quality code in less time.
Absolutely. It's really a question of, what are we trying to do? Are we really embracing DevOps, or are we just trying to integrate and bring new UI kind of view in so that we can span generations? Those are the questions you
Right.
have to ask yourself, what your intention is, and that will guide the decisions you make.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, so we've got here, since you're from IBM, right? we kind of put up your story. There are similar stories from BMC and CompuWare, and Broadcom. But I think that you guys have a great story, because not only have you been focusing on the mainframe, right? You've been focused across development, whether it's on-prem mainframe all the way out to the public cloud.
Yeah, I think that there's two elements I'd emphasize, and then we can move on. And that is, when we think about these needs in complementing what you're doing at an enterprise DevOps layer, you want to be able to bring the smarts that empower the developer and empower your sysprogs and the like to be able to automate what they do today. The other thing that we're seeing, as you talked about the economics and things of that nature, is that there's a trend where, amongst that shift of flow, if you will, on should things be on-prem, OpenShift, or should I say in the cloud, where should things be running? Am I trying to cloud enable, cloud assist? What am I trying to do? And we wanted to make sure that from our technologies that we brought to bear, we were positioned to help our clients get there, independent of what model that they choose. But key to the story, regardless of which technology you pick, is that it's a Git-based flow. We are aligned to Git-based. We are encouraging customers to have that single source SCM, to get away from the library that marries your versions with your environment, with your library. We need some independence, if you will, between those three stages in order to marry to what's happening on other platforms, to be like what the organization is doing.
Right, and this sort of would allow somebody to not have to worry so much about which is the deployment option that you're choosing, right? So that the development and the testing part is completely, the experience that a user has is exactly the same.
I define it, you use it, you consume it. It's a service. So we're thinking about our work in a different mindset. But all of these things, and you see it from ZDIH offering that IBM just announced, to what we're doing with AI, and this is universal across all the vendors, right? It's all being based off of Git. And the reason why
Right.
is when you look at things like code scanning, code reveal, security, things of that nature, they all expect everything to be in Git. So
Right.
at some point, your stuff is going to have to be in Git. Question is, do you have it in 2 places or 1? And I submit to you, it's easier to manage it if it's in 1 place.
One place. Yep. Yeah, Git has become sort of like oxygen
It
in
is
this world.
definitely.
Yeah. So it's like you can't take a breath without dealing with it. So, but so
A couple minutes, Scott.
Got it. Yep. So so how do we get started, right? In many ways, people ask, it was it the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The first step is to find the folks, who are going to help you move forward. And we'll work, either have or will work with folks on the other teams who've done this stuff, and I get everybody to watch Who Moved My Cheese, because there's going to be a lot of cheese moving going on during this operation. But this is no different than any other kind of organizational change from the perspective of getting people to move forward. Right, find the folks who are going to help you row the boat, and then there are some accommodations for folks who don't want to row the boat. For the folks who are you're going to pry my I'll give you my 3270 when you pry it from my cold dead hands. Rocket and IBM have worked together to get the Git client running on ZOS under USS. So it's not a huge leap to take a mainframe developer who's just not going to give up that device and have him work on Git from ISPF. Right?
Span the generations is what I call it.
Yeah, spanning the generation. Well,
you need to relate.
Yeah, and so for the guy who likes to tinker in the driveway with the carburetor, on his 1967 Camaro, you've got an option. And for the new folks, they can use the same tools that they've been using in college and probably on the distributed side. So this Ziggy is a great piece of open source software that sort of helps everything look like they used to look like and manage it the same way. Obviously a little work to set up, but certainly better than having a bunch of people crossing their arms and sitting at the back of the room telling you that they're not going to do it. So to kind of wrap it up, right? I think we both agree, right, that getting to an enterprise-wide DevOps strategy is really rewarding for your development organization. It's going to be a little challenging at the beginning, but the faster you get into it, the faster it will start to run. We'll get your teams to work more closely, and because they're going to be in the same tools, certainly around requirements and design, and so there'll be more natural touch points where somebody on the distributed side needs something from the mainframe or vice versa, and using these new tools and processes will really help unleash the folks in your organization, get them out of the mundane rote work that they're doing today. Here at CDW, we have a big team that's all about agile and software development, and we can come in and analyze and and assess and consult with your teams to help you build out that enterprise DevOps strategy, not just on the mainframe, but all the way out through your cloud development, and help also on the operational side, getting it set up and running. And Jennifer, you could talk a bit about IBM's role in the world, which is pretty good sized.
Yeah, we definitely have a set of solutions. We're all about being able to bring that mainframe awareness into your current DevOps practices. I work with organizations every day on how do I bridge that gap and how do I even understand how to engage in the dialogue. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. The team will connect you with me.
Right. And so our public services announcement, right? So CDW, with the Sirius acquisition of a couple of years ago, is one of the largest IBM zSystems partners. We don't just do DevOps, right? We'll help you with your mainframes from womb to tomb, right? Anything from sizing your new hardware, adjusting your software, upgrades, software swaps, getting things working better. We also have a huge managed services arm if you need help in doing some of the day-to-day run and operate. So, we have here, we can help you get more from your mainframe investment. So just give us a call. And I guess that takes us to the question slide. That guy looks like he's falling into the data center, doesn't he? So Brian, if you're clear, I think we can close out.
Yeah, we're clear on the Q&A. Thank you so much, Scott and Jennifer. Great discussion. Talked a bit about CDW services and IBM solutions and services. Just to wrap here, next webinar again, August 17th for hybrid cloud. Please submit your surveys, which will be sent to you later today. And so this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a great day.